Black ink dried on the page, and my hand kept shaking even after the pen left the paper. I had signed my name 1,000 times in my life, on school forms, lease renewals, late payment plans, but this signature felt like a trade. Not money for work. Not time for tips. It felt like my future for my daughter's next breath. The room smelled like polished wood and expensive cologne, and I could still taste diner coffee on my tongue. I told myself I was strong. I was lying. Chicago winter pressed on the windows, daring me to breathe. My name is Grace Miller, and I live on the edge of the city where sirens sound like weather. Lily is 6, all bright eyes and stubborn hope, but her lungs betray her at night. The machine beside her bed blinks green when she sleeps, and I count those blinks like prayers. Grandma June sleeps on my couch with her cardigan folded under her cheek, pretending she is only visiting. We all pretend. On my kitchen counter sits a folder from the hospital, and another from a custody lawyer, both stamped urgent. Each says pay, prove, or lose what matters. By day I pour pancakes and refill cheap mugs at a diner near the L tracks. By evening I clean offices downtown, wiping other people's fingerprints from glass doors that never stick. Somewhere between shifts I rush to Lily's school, then to a pharmacy, then home, trying to make my face look calm. My phone holds reminders I cannot delete, inhaler refills, court dates, rent, the power bill. The hospital estimate for Lily's next year of care is $280,000, and the lawyer wants $12,000 before he even files. I keep working because stopping would mean admitting I cannot save her. The custody part is what makes my stomach twist. Lily's father hasn't shown up for birthdays or doctor visits, but he knows how to show up in court. He wants weekends now, he says, and I know it is not about love. It is about control. Grandma June tells me to breathe, to keep receipts, to keep my temper, to keep my head down. I do, until I wake at 2:30 in the morning and realize my head down is drowning. I tried honest options, payment plans, charity forms, shifts, selling jewelry. Nothing moved fast enough for Lily's lungs. 3 days ago, a hospital administrator mentioned a private foundation that sometimes stepped in for exceptional cases. I filled out the forms on my break, hands still smelling like bleach, and I wrote a letter I never wanted anyone to read. I asked for help without sounding like I was begging, which is a strange skill poverty teaches you. Tonight, just after 9 p.m., an unknown number texted that a car would be waiting and that Ethan Park would escort me to speak with Nico Valentine. I had never met him, but his name already felt like a locked door. I stared at my sleeping girl and memorized her face the way you memorize exits in a burning building. Her cheeks were pink from the humidifier, her hair spread across the pillow like spilled ink. Grandma June insisted she would stay awake, though her eyes were already heavy, and I nodded because I needed to believe her. I packed Lily's inhaler and a snack anyway, as if a granola bar could fight a lawsuit. Then I put on my cleanest coat, the one that still carried diner grease in the seams. My boots squeaked on the tile as I left. The black car waited at the curb like it had been parked there for hours, too clean for our street, too quiet for Chicago. Its windows were tinted, and the driver stepped out before I could decide to turn back. He opened the rear door with the kind of practiced respect that makes you feel smaller, not honored. I slid inside and held my hands in my lap so I would not touch anything by accident. Leather and winter air mixed in the cabin. The door shut with a soft thud that sounded final. I watched the building shrink away. As we moved south toward the river, streetlights blurred into gold lines on the glass. The city I knew became a postcard I could not enter. I tried to picture Nico Valentine from the few photos I had seen online, a man in dark suits with eyes that never seemed to blink. I tried to imagine what kind of person hired someone like Ethan Park to deliver messages like a court summons. Part of me wanted to believe it was a mistake, that the foundation had chosen me, that help could be simple. But my life never offered simple help. If you are listening right now, I want you to do something small for me. Comment the city you are watching from, not because I need numbers, but because that night I felt like I was the only mother awake in the world. The car's heater hummed, and my phone sat dead in my pocket, as if my old life had been switched off. I thought about Lily's lungs, about Grandma June's brave smile, about the judge who might decide I was unfit. I wondered what you would sign for your child. My throat tightened when the car turned east. We pulled into an underground garage beneath a tower I had walked past without looking up. The gate slid shut behind us, sealing out the street noise. The driver did not ask where I wanted to go. He already knew. When he opened my door, cold air rushed in, sharp as metal, and I stepped onto polished concrete that did not belong to my shoes. Somewhere above, a man named Nico Valentine waited with terms I had not heard. I told myself this was only for Lily. I did not yet know how many promises I was about to bend. The garage smelled of cold concrete and tire rubber, like the underside of the city. The gate sealed behind us and the last hint of street noise vanished, replaced by a quiet so thick I could hear my own swallow. A guard scanned the car, then scanned me, and I felt my diner coat shrink on my shoulders. Everything here was clean in a way that made me nervous, as if mess was illegal. The elevator had no buttons, only a black panel that accepted Ethan Park's palm like it belonged to him. We rose without a sound. My ears popped. My thoughts did too. I kept picturing Lily's chest lifting under that blinking monitor, and I kept reminding myself this was help. But help that arrives at 9 p.m. in a private garage is never free. Upstairs the tower felt less like a building and more like a vault. Ethan walked ahead of me with the smooth confidence of someone who never waits in lines. He was mid-30s maybe, hair perfect, suit darker than the elevator glass, and his face held the neutral kindness of a man paid to stay calm. He didn't ask who I was. He confirmed it with a glance at a tablet, like my life was already filed. We crossed a hallway that looked like a museum corridor, bare walls, soft lights, no photos, no warmth. A door opened before I reached for it. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and something expensive that wasn't perfume, more like money itself. Ethan guided me to a chair without touching me, yet I felt steered. I noticed cameras that pretended to be smoke detectors. I told myself to breathe slowly, because panic is loud. Somewhere far above, a city outside hummed, but this room didn't. Nico Valentine sat near the windows, Chicago spread behind him like a grid of lights he owned. He didn't stand, and he didn't need to. His stillness filled the space the way winter fills your lungs. He looked younger than I expected and older at the same time, like stress had carved him clean. Dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes that didn't flicker toward comfort, only calculation. When he finally looked directly at me, I felt inspected, not admired. The silence stretched until my skin buzzed. I realized he used quiet the way other men used volume. Ethan placed a thin folder on the table between us, and Nico's fingers rested on it like a paperweight on my future. I wanted to ask if this was really charity. Instead I waited, because waiting was the only power I had. In that moment I understood he measured people by what they cost. I came with a story I had rehearsed in my head, a mother explaining numbers to strangers who think love should be free. I told myself to speak plainly, to keep Lily out of the spotlight, but my fear kept circling back to her name. Lily's treatments and equipment for the next year add up to $280,000 if nothing goes wrong. Custody court is scheduled for late next month, and my lawyer wants $12,000 just to start. I make tips and mop floors. I have no savings, no family with money, and no time. Grandma June can bake comfort into a kitchen, but she can't bake oxygen into my child. I watched Nico's face for sympathy and found none, only attention. That was worse, because attention meant he saw the leverage. If your child's life had a price tag, what would you do? My throat burned as I waited there. Nico finally slid the folder toward me, not gently, just efficiently. The first page wasn't a grant letter or a payment plan. It was a contract, cleanly printed, full of dates and conditions, and my name already typed in the blank like someone had decided I belonged there. 24 months of marriage in appearance and in law, strict confidentiality, and an agreement that we would separate quietly afterward. A settlement amount sat in the margins like bait, enough to cover Lily's care and leave breathing room for the first time in years. My hands went cold and then hot, like my body couldn't choose panic or anger. Nico's reason arrived with the same calm. His late grandfather's trust demanded a wife before his birthday, and if he failed, control shifted to Robert Valentine. I wanted to run. I pictured Lily. I stayed. The paper seemed to hum with threat. Ethan said another page beside the contract, a non-disclosure that felt like a gag dressed in legal language. Nico's calm never cracked, but I felt the edge under it, the impatience of someone who lived by deadlines. He made it clear I wasn't being courted. I was being recruited. And I hated how quickly my mind started calculating anyway, because desperation teaches you math. I asked for time in the only way I could, by standing up slowly and forcing my legs to work. Ethan was already moving, already arranging the return ride, as if my choice had been scheduled. Nico gave me until 6 in the morning. Hours, not days. In the elevator down, I pressed my nails into my palm until the sting anchored me. Back home, Lily slept with her fist curled under her chin, trusting me completely. I watched her and realized I was already falling. By 5 in the morning I was already awake, staring at the ceiling like it might hand me a different option. Nico had given me until 6 in the morning, and the clock on my microwave felt louder than the city. Lily slept curled around her stuffed rabbit, breathing with that soft whistle that always made me sit up. Grandma June sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea she never drank, watching me the way you watch a storm line creep closer. I kept thinking about $280,000 and $12,000, and how love can be cornered so brutally. I did not say yes out loud to anyone in that apartment, but inside my chest the answer had already formed. I imagined the judge's face when my bank statements hit the table. I imagined Lily's inhaler running empty. I imagined my own pride paying for none of it. Ethan Park returned with the documents exactly at 6 in the morning, as if my life was a meeting on his calendar. My hands shook again when I signed, and the pen felt heavier than metal. I told myself I was choosing Lily, not him, and I hated needing to choose. The courthouse looked the same as every other government building, except we entered through a side door where a guard nodded before I even spoke. Ethan moved us through metal detectors that didn't beep for him. Nico appeared beside us with no entourage, just a quiet shadow of men in the hallways who pretended to be bored. Fluorescent lights flattened everything, even my fear. Lily held my fingers and whispered questions with her eyes, so I smiled until my cheeks hurt. Grandma June smoothed my coat collar like she was fixing a torn hem. No music, no flowers, only paperwork. When the clerk slid the license across the counter, my stomach flipped the way it does on a steep bridge. Nico signed with steady strokes, not looking at me, as if he was closing a deal. I signed next, trying to keep my handwriting from showing how scared I was. The ring arrived in a small box, plain and heavy, and when it touched my finger I felt the pressure travel up my arm. Lily stared at it like it was magic, then gave me a proud grin that nearly broke me. A camera flashed once, proof more than memory. Ethan handled everything that normally belongs to family, the certified copies, the waiting car, the next addresses. He spoke in low tones that sounded like instructions, and people obeyed. I caught glimpses of Nico's profile in glass, hard lines that never softened. Grandma June kept her chin lifted, but her hand trembled when she squeezed my shoulder, and I felt her fear seep into my bones. Lily asked for a snack with the seriousness of a judge, and I gave her one because normalcy was the only gift I could afford. By noon I was a wife on paper, alone. Night came too quickly. At 11 at night we were in a suite that smelled like fresh sheets and luxury, the kind of place where nothing has ever spilled. Lily was already asleep in the adjoining room, tucked in by Grandma June, while Ethan checked doors like a ritual. Nico stood near the window again, city lights behind him, and I waited for kindness the way you wait for a bus that never arrives. His words, when they came, were smooth and final, explaining I was a role, a shield, a signature. Not a partner. Not a problem worth comfort. I nodded like I understood, because understanding was safer than arguing. Then I walked into the bathroom and closed the door with careful hands. The tile was cold under my bare feet, and the mirror showed a woman who looked older than yesterday. I set the ring on the sink just to see my finger without it, and that pale mark made my throat tighten. I cried silently, ribs shaking, because Lily was close and I refused to let her hear me fall apart. Anger followed, hot and clean, and it kept me upright. I washed face and rehearsed calm. Back in the bedroom I found Grandma June folding Lily's sweater with deliberate care, like she could press safety into fabric. Lily slept with her mouth open, and I watched her a minute, matching my breath to hers. Nico didn't come near us. He stayed in the other room, a presence behind walls, and that distance felt intentional, like a warning. I tucked the contract envelope into my bag beside Lily's inhaler, 2 items that should not belong together. I promised myself I would survive these 24 months and keep my dignity, even when it hurt. Tomorrow the real test. At 6 in the morning Ethan arrived, punctual as consequences. The car was waiting, and the city outside looked normal, which felt insulting. I packed Lily's bag with pajamas, crayons, and medicine, then lifted her onto my hip while she blinked awake and trusted me. Grandma June followed with her purse clutched tight, trying to smile. Nico walked ahead of us without looking back, and somehow that was worse than cruelty. The ring on my finger caught light when the elevator doors closed, and it felt less like jewelry and more like a lock. I stepped forward anyway for Lily. By 7 in the morning the car rolled through a gate that looked like it belonged to an embassy, not a home. Cameras tracked us with tiny red dots. A guard scanned the underside of the vehicle, then scanned my face, then waved us through without asking anything. Nico's building rose above the lake like a dark tooth. The elevator swallowed us, silent, keyless, obedient to Ethan's handprint. When the doors opened, warm air hit me, but it didn't feel welcoming. It felt controlled, filtered, measured, like even oxygen had rules. I clutched Lily's backpack straps and kept breathing anyway. Ethan led us down a hallway where every surface shined, then into a living room so wide it made my voice feel too small to use. Lily's sneakers squeaked on the floor. I expected cold art and sharp corners. Instead, a door stood half open and color spilled out. Inside was a playroom. Not a token basket of toys, but shelves of picture books, a tiny table with crayons, a soft rug printed with streets, and a jar of stickers shaped like stars. Someone had even set out apple slices and juice boxes. My suspicion rose, but my heart softened. Before I could decide whether to thank anyone or run, Ethan placed a new phone in my hand, already charged, already unlocked, already mine in name only. He explained the basics without sounding harsh, yet every sentence landed like a fence. Certain doors required escorts. Certain elevators would not respond to me. Calls would be routed through security. Visitors would be scheduled. Groceries and medication would arrive on a list I didn't write. Even Lily's bedtime was marked on a printed routine. I nodded, because arguing felt useless, and because Lily was watching my face for danger. I stayed steady. A man the size of a refrigerator stood near the kitchen archway, arms crossed, eyes scanning corners as if they might bite. Lily studied him the way she studies pigeons in the park, curious and fearless. She walked up, peeled a star sticker from the jar, and pressed it onto his black glove like she was awarding a medal. Then she tilted her head and inspected his serious expression as if deciding whether he could be trusted with her crayons. The big man didn't smile, but his shoulders dropped a fraction and I exhaled for the first time all day. That small warmth lasted until Ethan returned with a folder thicker than the marriage contract had been. He laid it on the counter beside Lily's juice box, as if paperwork belonged next to snacks now. Inside were enrollment forms for a private school I'd never toured, a calendar of a tutor scheduled to start next week, and confirmations from a pulmonary specialist whose office had already received Lily's records. My signature line was printed at the bottom of each page, waiting. Ethan's calm suggested relief, but my stomach turned. Help had arrived. Consent had not. It felt like doors locking. I wanted to tear the pages in half, not because school and doctors were bad, but because they were decisions I had begged life to let me make. Back in my apartment, every choice had been mine, even when they were terrible. Here, choices arrived pre-approved, wrapped in kindness that didn't ask permission. I pictured Lily in a new classroom, safe and warm, and my anger tangled with gratitude so tight I could barely separate them. Grandma June would have called this a blessing. My mother instincts called it a cage with lining. I smiled anyway, because Lily smiled first. Later, while Lily colored at the tiny table, I caught Nico in the doorway of the playroom, not entering, not speaking, just watching as if he didn't trust himself near something gentle. The light from the window softened his face for a second, and I saw fatigue there, and something like regret. When Lily held up her drawing toward the hall, Nico didn't step closer, but his gaze stayed locked, protective and distant at once. It hit me then that he wasn't guarding us from enemies. He was guarding a boundary inside himself, terrified of wanting what money can't buy. By late afternoon the house felt quieter, but the people in it moved faster. A guard checked the driveway twice in 10 minutes. Ethan's phone vibrated, and he angled the screen away from me, then scanned the street. I followed his gaze and noticed a sedan parked across the road, engine running, driver hidden behind glare. In my old neighborhood, cars idled all the time. Here, nothing was casual. Lily sensed my tension and climbed into my lap. I stroked her hair, smiling for her, while my eyes stayed on that car, waiting for the first crack in this protection. That night I carried Lily to bed in a room that smelled like paint and sheets, and I hated how comfort can hide fear. Grandma June tucked the blanket, kissed Lily's forehead, and stepped out with eyes shining. When the lights dimmed, I listened to the house breathe, vents humming, footsteps soft in the hall. This place was a fortress, not a home, built for storms Nico expected. I pressed my palm to Lily's back until her breathing steadied. In that hush I understood the truth: marrying Nico didn't erase danger. It redirected it toward us, and someone outside noticed. 2 days after we moved in, the world outside the gate started staring back. When Ethan took us down to the lobby for a doctor run, the air felt different, as if the building itself was holding its breath. A phone camera flashed near the revolving door, quick as lightning. I caught my reflection in the glass beside Lily's small face, and I looked like someone playing dress-up in borrowed safety. By the time we reached the car, my new phone buzzed with alerts Ethan hadn't approved. Across the street, a sedan idled, and its driver turned from us. At noon, a tabloid account posted my name beside Nico's, and strangers filled the space between with poison. They said I'd trapped him, that I'd sold Lily's face for money, that a single mom doesn't belong in a penthouse unless she's bought. I tried to scroll past it, but shame sticks like syrup. I kept remembering my diner uniform, my cracked hands, my rent receipts, as if proof of work could clean a rumor. Lily asked why everyone was taking pictures, and I told her it was just the big city being noisy. Inside my stomach tightened around every breath. That evening, security called Ethan to the front desk, and his calm face sharpened into something I hadn't seen yet. A plain envelope waited on the marble counter, no stamp, no return address, just my full legal name written neatly. My fingers went numb before I even touched it. Inside was a photocopied page from my custody filing, the one listing Lily's school and my last 3 addresses, with my case number circled in red ink. Not a thread in words, just a message in facts. Someone had reached into my life and pulled out the fragile parts on purpose. The house changed after that. Doors that had seemed heavy began to click with new locks. Staff moved faster and quieter, like they were trying not to wake a beast. Ethan swapped my phone for another and explained, with practiced calm, that my old number was unsafe. Routes were rewritten. Elevators required escorts. Even the blinds lowered automatically at night, sealing us from the street. I felt grateful and furious at the same time, because protection looked like possession when it arrived without asking. Somewhere behind it all, Nico stayed silent, and that silence made my skin itch all day. My first instinct was to grab Lily and disappear into the city, back to my old block where nobody cared who I married. Then I pictured that circled case number and realized the city wasn't hiding me anymore. Someone had already mapped my past, and running would only make the map easier. I paced the living room while guards hovered at a distance, pretending they weren't watching. I hated that their watchfulness also made me breathe easier. What does it do to a mother when strangers decide her child is leverage? It turns love into an alarm, ringing under everything. At 2:30 p.m. Lily wandered into the kitchen with her rabbit and asked for the story early, as if stories could reset the day. I sat with her on the rug and traced the pictures with my finger, forcing my voice to stay steady. She offered me half a cookie from the snack tray already stocked, proud of her generosity. I smiled so she wouldn't see my shaking. In the middle of the story she yawned and leaned into my side, trusting me like I was the mom from our apartment. That trust hurt, and it saved me too. Later I found Nico in the study, not comforting anyone, just absorbing information from a wall of screens like it was his language. He didn't look surprised by the envelope, which told me he had expected an opening move. He touched nothing I could see, yet the house responded to him, guards repositioned, a second car appeared in the garage, lights outside brightened. I felt the strange relief of being near someone who could move the world, and the bitter anger of needing that power. His calm didn't soothe me. It reminded me I had signed into his storm now. By 9 p.m. Ethan insisted we skip the lobby and use a service entrance, and I understood the reason before he explained it. Someone had posted a photo of Lily's coat, identifying the brand Grandma June bought at a store, like even our cheapness was entertainment. The sedan across the street was back, and this time the driver lifted a phone toward the gate. My stomach dropped. Ethan's screen flashed with a message he deleted too quickly for me to read. The guards' hands hovered near their belts, not dramatic, just ready. This wasn't random hate. It was organized attention. I tucked Lily into bed and stared at the custody page on the counter, the circle around my case number bleeding into my thoughts. Whoever sent it didn't want to break a window. They wanted to break my credibility, my custody, my grip on the story of who I am. Nico's fortress could block a stranger at the gate, but it couldn't block whispers traveling faster than truth. I held Lily close until her breathing deepened, then listened to the house settle into quiet. The enemy wouldn't lurk in a sedan. He would walk in smiling and call it concern. By 9 in the morning the house already felt different, like the walls had learned my name and decided to keep it. The envelope with Lily's case number sat in a drawer, but my nerves kept reopening it anyway. Ethan's footsteps were quieter than usual, and the guards looked past me as if they were scanning for something behind my shoulders. When Ethan told me a visitor was on the way, my stomach tightened so hard I tasted metal. He didn't say danger. He didn't need to. In this world, visitors meant leverage and I was learning to count them. It was 3 p.m. when the elevator chimed and Robert Valentine stepped out as if he owned the air. He wore a pale cashmere coat and a smile that looked practiced in mirrors. His cologne arrived before he did, clean and sharp, like antiseptic pretending to be warmth. He reached for my hand with the confidence of a man who expects compliance, and his grip closed around my fingers with gentle pressure that still felt like a verdict. A watch flashed at his wrist, bright and cold. He looked at Lily, then at me, measuring what I cost to him. He spoke softly, the way doctors do when they are about to deliver bad news, and his eyes never stopped smiling even when his meaning did. Everything about him suggested concern, his posture angled toward Lily, his careful attention to Grandma June, his little nods that implied he was listening. Yet every detail carried a hook. He noticed my hands, the faint bleach cracks, and his expression said I was temporary. He mentioned reputations like they were fragile children, and I understood he was placing me on a scale. What kind of mother drags her daughter into this spotlight tonight? Robert's concern slid neatly into procedure. He referenced Nico's grandfather with reverence, as if grief were a business asset, and then he let the real blade show. Certain trusts, he implied, required more than a marriage certificate. They required legitimacy, stability, the appearance of a real union. He didn't accuse me directly. He suggested questions that other people might ask, and he offered to protect the company from embarrassment. I realized he was telling me the marriage could be tested, audited, challenged, until it cracked. Nico's power was conditional, and I was the lever and he enjoyed that I knew. As he spoke, I caught pieces of his world slipping out between polite phrases. Board members. Voting shares. Controlling interest. A clause tied to Nico's birthday and the trust's timeline. He talked about optics the way I talk about Lily's medication schedule, like something you don't forget if you want to survive. Ethan stood near the doorway, face unreadable, and I understood he wasn't a driver of cars. He drove outcomes. Grandma June's fingers worried her rosary in her pocket, and Lily sat quietly, sensing the chill. This wasn't romance. It was governance, and I had walked into its courtroom. Nico stayed still beside the window, but I watched the small betrayals of emotion that his father probably taught him to hide. His jaw tightened once, then smoothed. His hand rested on the back of a chair without gripping it, as if he refused to show strain. When Robert's eyes flicked to Lily, Nico's posture shifted a fraction toward us, protective without touching. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, not from air conditioning but from history. I could feel the old fight between them, father and son, legitimacy and rebellion, playing in silence like a loaded film reel. I wanted to tell Robert he had no right to weigh my motherhood like stock, but I swallowed it because Lily was watching my mouth. Outrage is a luxury when your child needs you calm. Robert kept offering solutions that sounded generous: appearances, introductions, charity photos, ways to make me look acceptable. Each suggestion carried the same message, that my past was a stain his family could launder. The worst part was how kindly he delivered it. Are the most dangerous people the ones who never raise their voice? My skin prickled as I understood his plan required an audience. When Robert left, the room felt bruised, like a quiet place after someone slams a door without touching it. Ethan's phone buzzed and he made a note, already arranging whatever Robert had requested. Nico didn't chase his father, but he didn't soften either. He looked past me, through me, calculating consequences, and I realized this meeting was only the opening move. Robert had planted the idea that I could be judged, and he would prove it in public. A gala, a fundraiser, a stage of cameras and whispers. I carried Lily upstairs and started practicing my smile in the mirror. That night I laid out my dress, the one from a cousin's wedding, and I wondered how fabric could change what people decided about you. Grandma June whispered prayers in the guest room, and the guards rotated outside our door in shoes. Lily asked if we were going to a party, and I told her yes, because childhood deserves simple words. Inside, dread curled tight. Robert didn't need to threaten me, he had already made me feel on trial. Tomorrow, under chandeliers and flashbulbs, he would see if I stumbled. If I did, he would call it proof against us. By 8 p.m. my dress felt like borrowed armor, tight at the ribs, smooth at the wrists, pretending I belonged to someone fearless. Ethan's team pinned my hair and checked my phone like it was luggage. Grandma June kissed Lily's forehead, then adjusted the rabbit under her arm, promising fun in a voice that tried not to shake. Lily grinned anyway, proud of my sparkly shoes. I kept thinking this night was not for me, it was for her future, for court dates, for lungs that needed clean air. If I cracked, people would call it proof, and Lily pay. The gala sat inside a museum on the lakefront, all marble steps and velvet ropes. Security scanned Nico first, then me, then Lily, as if motherhood could hide contraband. Photographers clustered behind stanchions, lenses glittering like insects. I smelled champagne, expensive perfume, and winter coats drying near heaters. Nico walked a half step ahead, not offering comfort, only clearance. Every head turned in a wave that looked polite from far away and predatory up close. My ring caught the flash, and I felt branded. Ethan hovered nearby, eyes sweeping exits, while donors laughed, convinced danger belonged to other neighborhoods entirely. Inside the room glittered with crystal and quiet judgment. People smiled with their mouths and kept their eyes on Nico's shoulders, not my face. When introductions happened, hands reached past me as if I was the assistant carrying the purse. I heard my name repeated with a question mark hidden inside it, then Lily's name said too brightly, like a prop. Grandma June stayed close, chin up, but I felt her pulse in the grip of her fingers. I wanted to run to the bathroom and lock the door. I stayed because Lily watched me. My smile felt stitched on. A waiter passed with a tray of pale drinks and the cameras angled closer, hungry for a moment. Near a cluster of board members, a woman in a white gown brushed by me with a perfumed shoulder, too close to be an accident. Her elbow bumped the tray, and liquid spilled across my bodice in a cold splash. The room paused, then resumed breathing with interest. Heat rushed to my cheeks, and my first thought was the diner, where I would have apologized. Here, apologizing would make me smaller. Someone lifted a phone, and flashbulbs multiplied, capturing stain-like evidence. My hand started to tremble, but I pressed my fingertips against my clutch until the shaking quieted. I could feel every eye waiting for tears, for anger, for the single mom to prove she was unstable. For 1 second I imagined sprinting out, disappearing into the cold, letting the rumor win. Then Lily's voice floated in my head, her bedtime question about whether brave people get scared. I drew one slow breath, lifted my chin, and chose calm. I treated the spill as a fact, not a humiliation, and the world lost its script. I looked at June and smiled. I asked an attendant for a napkin without pleading, then dabbed the fabric with small careful motions, like tending a bruise. Instead of hiding, I stepped toward the brightest corner, letting the light show I was still standing. I adjusted Lily's cardigan and smoothed her hair, giving the camera something boring, a mother, steady. Grandma June slipped me a spare scarf from her bag, and I draped it over the stain as if it were fashion. The whispering thinned. People hate a target that refuses to bleed. My pulse stayed loud, but my face stayed quiet. I kept shoulders square. Nico appeared beside me with the suddenness of a closing door. He did not touch my arm, yet the people around us shifted back, sensing ownership and consequence. His gaze fixed on the woman in white, then on the nearest photographers, and the air tightened as if a rule had been spoken. Security moved in a smooth line, blocking angles, guiding bodies away, turning my accident into a private corner again. I hated the relief that flooded me. I also hated how small it made me feel, like protection came with a price tag and I was the receipt tonight. Later, when we moved toward the exit, I saw Nico's hand flex once, then settle, as if he was restraining something hotter than anger. His breathing sounded controlled, but his eyes kept flicking to my scarf, to the stain underneath, to my face, like he was furious at the world and at himself for caring. In the car, the city blurred past and the silence grew heavy. Ethan checked his phone, jaw tight, and I realized the footage would travel faster than any explanation. The gala wasn't entertainment. It was documentation, curated for someone who preferred cuts to knives later. Back at the tower, I helped Lily wash her hands and asked her to tell me the best part of the night. She chose the dessert table, not the whispers, and that innocence made my throat ache. Upstairs, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, scarf pinned like a bandage, smile practiced like a defense. I finally understood why Robert wanted chandeliers and cameras. He wasn't trying to embarrass me for fun. He was building a record. Tomorrow, in a boardroom, that record would become a question about legitimacy, and my family would be the exhibit for him. At 9 a.m, the lobby smelled like lemon polish and panic. Ethan escorted me through a side elevator that skipped the public floors, and the doors opened onto a corridor lined with frosted glass. Nico's headquarters felt nothing like his home. The house hid its teeth behind comfort. This place showed them openly, polished and silent. My ring felt heavier with every step, as if it knew I was walking into a room where love was irrelevant and paperwork was law. The boardroom was a long rectangle of light and reflection. A wall of windows framed the lake, but the chairs faced inward, toward control. Men and women in tailored suits sat spaced like chess pieces, not close enough to touch, not far enough to pretend they weren't allied. No one offered me a seat until Ethan slid one out, and even that motion felt like placing evidence on a table. I heard the hum of the building and my own shallow breath in my ears. I understood the stakes in fragments, the way you understand a storm by the pressure in your ears. Nico's grandfather had built a trust to keep the company inside the family, but the trust came with conditions. Marriage, stability, reputation, all the things rich people treat as assets. If the board decided Nico had violated those conditions, they could trigger a review, suspend certain voting rights, and hand decision-making to an interim committee. Robert Valentine sat near the head, calm as a surgeon, positioned like the solution to a problem he created. The room already felt arranged for his victory. The meeting began with language that sounded polite but felt sharp. They spoke of investor confidence and public perception, and every time those words landed I felt my cheeks heat, because they meant me. They referenced the gala and the photos that made me look like a headline. They avoided my eyes and measured Nico. The demand came through clearly: prove this marriage was legitimate beyond a certificate, prove it wasn't a tactical move to satisfy a clause. I felt reduced to a risk factor. Have you ever watched powerful people call cruelty procedure and act surprised when you flinch? Robert's turn arrived smoothly, like a man stepping onto a stage he funded. He spoke about safeguarding the brand, about protecting Nico from distractions, about ensuring the trust's intent was honored. Then he unfolded his real weapon. A screen lit up with documents that should have stayed private, excerpts from my custody filing, a summary of Lily's projected medical costs, and a record of a charitable payment routed through a Valentine-affiliated foundation. My stomach dropped so fast I gripped the chair. They had taken the worst pieces of my life and framed them as motive. In their version, I wasn't a mother drowning. I was a woman paid to play wife, using a sick child as cover. I wanted to stand and shout that I had never asked for any of this, that my child's lungs were not a strategy. Instead I sat still, because rage in that room would be converted into proof. I watched the faces around the table as they skimmed the documents, absorbing them like they were reading quarterly earnings. I saw how easily poverty becomes suspicion in polished spaces. The board wasn't asking if I was real. They were asking if I was safe for them to display. My palms sweated, and I tasted the metallic edge of humiliation. It felt like being judged for saving Lily the only way available. Under the anger, clarity formed. This wasn't about romance or morality. It was about control of the company and control of the story. Robert didn't need to win by taking Nico's shares directly. He could win by poisoning the board with doubt until they reached for him as stability. They were using my motherhood as leverage because it was the one thing that made Nico predictable. I had entered this marriage to protect Lily, and now Lily's name was being passed around a corporate table like currency. I refused to accept the shame they tried to assign, but I also understood that dignity alone wouldn't stop them. Nico remained quiet through most of it, which scared me more than anger would have. His silence wasn't surrender, though. It was restraint, the kind that precedes a blade. When he finally moved, the room shifted. He didn't need volume to take space, his stillness did it. He made it clear, through measured authority, that Lily's survival was not scandal and my desperation was not fraud. He refused to let the board turn a child's medical file into entertainment. I felt something in him harden and soften at the same time, a boundary sliding into place. Protective, yes, but also personal, as if he was deciding that shame would no longer touch our doorstep. The meeting ended without a clean win, which meant it fed Robert's next step. Ethan guided me out before my legs trusted me. In the hallway my phone buzzed with alerts, and Ethan muted the screen too fast for me to see. Outside, reporters waited behind barricades. Nico's car door closed between me and them, but it felt like a lid on water. As the city blurred past, I knew the verdict would hit overnight, and Lily would be dragged into it first. At 7 a.m. my phone wouldn't stop vibrating against the nightstand, a frantic insect trapped under glass. The hallway outside Lily's room carried a different rhythm, faster footsteps, doors opening and closing with soft clicks. Ethan's voice stayed low somewhere downstairs, and the guards avoided my eyes like they were hiding bad weather. I didn't need anyone to explain it. Something had snapped overnight, the way ice splits when you step wrong. I slid out of bed, felt the cold floor, and knew the world had found us again. Before I reached the window, my stomach already sank. On the kitchen island, Ethan set a tablet down without handing it to me, as if the screen could bite. I glanced anyway and saw my face beside Nico's, cropped tight around my ring and Lily's coat. The captions weren't real sentences, just accusations dressed as entertainment. Strangers argued about my motherhood like it was a product review. They turned my diner paycheck into a punchline and my marriage certificate into a crime. Have you ever been reduced to rumor by strangers? As if repetition could replace truth, my cheeks burned, and I kept swallowing air that tasted like shame. Then the leak went deeper than photos. A new thread posted documents only my lawyer and the court should have seen, my custody case number, the hearing set for 9:30 in the morning on April 3rd, and a copy of Lily's pulmonary appointment at 2:15 in the afternoon. Someone highlighted the line listing our old address, as if poverty needed an arrow. It wasn't random gossip, it was a curated file, trimmed to make me look bought and Nico look complicit. My hands went numb. Lily's life wasn't just being watched. It was being arranged into a weapon. Grandma June stood by the sink twisting her cardigan sleeve until the knit stretched thin. She didn't ask questions, her face already held the answer, that we were exposed. Lily came in rubbing sleep from her eyes and asked why everyone kept saying my name on the phone. I told her grown-ups get loud when they don't understand things, and I offered oatmeal like it could fix the day. She accepted, then asked if we were still going to the new school. I nodded, smiling. When she turned away, I pressed my palm to my mouth, fighting urge to scream. Nico didn't come to the kitchen. He stayed upstairs with Ethan, behind doors that closed softly but meant no entry. I could sense him moving through the house like weather, present, unavoidable, but never warm. Part of me wanted him to hold Lily and tell the world to back off. Instead I got silence and a schedule change. The old humiliation returned, the wedding night lesson that I was useful, not cherished. I hated myself for needing more than protection. I hated him for making me feel greedy for wanting it. My trust cracked along its quiet seam all at once. After the first wave of nausea passed, a colder thought settled in. Silence was giving them the microphone. Every hour we hid, the story grew teeth, and Lily became a character written by strangers. I opened my notebook like I used to for waitressing shifts and began listing what mattered: dates, payments, who could verify Lily's diagnoses, who knew my work history, what could prove I hadn't hunted Nico, only survival. I didn't want sympathy, I wanted clarity. If they were playing optics, then truth had to become strategy. I started thinking about timing, a voice, and saying it first. Ethan pushed for silence, lawsuits, and private fixes, but I could feel that feeding Robert's storyline. Nico's instinct leaned the same way, quieter yet absolute, like shutting a vault and calling it peace. I needed sunlight, not another lock. I remembered a reporter from late night news, Dana Shriver, the one people trusted to be fair even when the subject was rich and ruthless. If we chose the room, the timing, and the facts, we could stop being hunted and start speaking. My hands still shook, but now they shook with purpose. Fear could ride along, but it wouldn't drive today. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I sat at the edge of her bed and watched the monitor blink. I whispered promises into the quiet, the kind no court can measure. I would not let strangers turn her into a headline. I would not let Robert's concerns steal her childhood. Nico could keep his fortress, but I needed a voice outside it. I pictured the interview, my hands on my knees, my story told, no begging, no hiding. The thought terrified me, so I knew it mattered. In the morning I would request a meeting and step into light first. I left the drawer open, letting the case number stare at me until it stopped feeling like poison and started feeling like proof. If they dragged my life into the open, it would bring the whole thing, not edited scraps. I would explain the contract, the deadline, and how a mother calculates when corners close. I would do it without apology, because shame was the rope they wanted in my hands. Grandma June watched me write, steadying my shoulder. In the hallway, Nico's steps paused near Lily's door, listening. Tomorrow we would choose our room, and I would speak first. By 10 in the morning I had stopped asking permission to be understood. The headlines had already decided I was a scheme, and my silence was helping them. I looked at Lily eating cereal, feet swinging, and I felt the switch flip inside me: protect, not hide. Hiding is what people do when they feel guilty, and I was guilty of nothing except desperation. Ethan's plan was containment, Nico's plan was silence, and my plan became truth. I wanted the world to see a mother, not a rumor. I chose to speak first. If my voice shook, it would stand. Ethan brought in a crisis team, sleek and cautious, and they treated me like a liability to be wrapped in velvet. They talked around me, offering lawsuits and statements and private corrections, all designed to keep the brand unscarred. I listened, then pictured April 3rd on that leaked custody page, and I refused to let Lily's name become a footnote. I asked for one person the public trusted, Dana Shriver, the journalist who didn't smile for billionaires. Nico supported the idea with a tight nod, but I could feel his instinct to control every detail. I insisted the story mine. 2 days later we drove to a small studio Dana used for serious interviews, not celebrity fluff. Security swept the parking lot, checked the lights, and sealed the hallway like we were transporting evidence. The room was simple: 1 table, 2 chairs, soft lamps, a microphone clipped near my collar. The quiet felt different from Nico's house. This quiet was chosen, not imposed. My hands trembled anyway, so I pressed my palms flat and focused on breathing. Dana's eyes were steady, curious, and respectful, and that steadiness made me brave. I remembered my apron and decided shame would not lead. When the camera light blinked on, I told the truth in the order it happened. I explained the $280,000 estimate for Lily's care, the $12,000 retainer, the late notices, and the night a black car found me. I described the folder on the glass table and the terms spelled out in clean ink: 24 months of a legal marriage, strict confidentiality, a quiet divorce after, and a settlement meant to cover medical bills and a future. I didn't paint myself as noble. I admitted I signed because my child needed air more than I needed pride. That was the math. Then I shared the part that hurt more than the ink. I explained that the wedding day felt like paperwork with a ring, and the wedding night felt like being dismissed without raising a voice. Nico made sure I understood I was a shield for a deadline, not a woman he chose. He didn't need cruelty, his distance did the work. I remembered standing barefoot on cold tile, setting my ring on the sink, and realizing I could survive poverty, but humiliation is a hunger. That night hardened something in me. I promised myself Lily would never see me beg. I made it clear I wasn't asking to be liked. I was asking to be seen accurately. A system that punishes poor mothers had cornered me, and I negotiated the only currency I had left: my consent, my time, my name. I said I would rather be judged for the truth than loved for a lie, because lies were already choking my child's childhood. Nico sat off camera, silent, and I felt his discomfort with exposure, but I held the wheel. I talked about working doubles, about fear, about choosing survival, and I refused to apologize for loving Lily fiercely. After the interview, I expected to feel empty, but I felt lighter, like I had set down a suitcase I'd been carrying since my first eviction notice. Messages still came, but the tone changed. Some people stayed cruel, yet others recognized a mother's math and called the smear what it was. Dana's segment aired with context, and suddenly Robert's concern looked less like protection and more like manipulation. Ethan reported calmer markets, fewer frantic calls, and board members asking for documentation instead of gossip. I wasn't winning a fairy tale. I was winning space to breathe, and that was enough. Still, relief doesn't erase enemies, it only reveals their next move. That evening I found Nico on the balcony, city lights reflected in his eyes, and I sensed he respected my choice even if it scared him. He had protected me with walls and guards, but I had protected us with sunlight. Ethan warned that Robert would not tolerate losing narrative control. I could already feel the counterpunch forming around the custody hearing, around Lily's school, around the word unfit. Robert didn't need to touch me to hurt me, he could file papers and smile. The thought made me clench. Before bed I sat beside Lily and watched her chest rise with a steady rhythm the internet never sees. I told her a story about brave girls who keep going, and I kept my voice soft so fear wouldn't leak out. When she fell asleep, I went to the kitchen and found the marriage contract copy Ethan kept for records. I didn't shred it yet. I just held it and understood the truth. The contract was public, but the war wasn't done. Robert would strike at custody, and Nico would be forced to choose between legacy and protection very soon. Relief lasted exactly one morning. At 7 in the evening, Ethan's tablet showed a new filing in my custody case, stamped urgent and wrapped in the language of concern. Someone had requested an emergency review, citing media chaos, unstable housing, and my sudden marriage into a high-risk world. The paperwork didn't threaten, it pretended to protect Lily. But it carried Robert's fingerprints in every polished sentence. My hands went cold. The same people who called me a scheme now offered to save my daughter from me, on paper. By nightfall, court felt closer than the lake outside our windows. Grandma June read the notice twice, lips pressed tight, then started packing snacks as if a hearing was just another school trip. Lily asked why grown-ups kept emailing my name, and I told her we were handling it, because children deserve certainty even when adults don't. Inside, I was shaking. I pictured a judge seeing headlines instead of homework charts, seeing my ring instead of Lily's breathing logs. I wanted to run back to my old apartment, where danger was familiar. But Robert had chosen a cleaner battlefield, one where panic looked like guilt and threat wore a friendly badge. Nico didn't respond with louder locks. He responded with light. He invited my custody attorney, a child advocate, and an independent doctor to review Lily's records, then compiled a timeline that traced the leak back to Robert's foundation channels. Ethan filed motions that demanded accountability for the unauthorized release, and Nico insisted the company's compliance team cooperate fully, even if it embarrassed the brand. Watching him choose transparency felt strange, like seeing a storm decide to become rain. He still spoke in controlled sentences, but his actions said Lily was not collateral. She was a line he would not cross. The board met again at 2:30 p.m., this time with Dana Shriver's segment playing in the background and new affidavits on the table. Robert arrived wearing the same calm smile, but it faltered when Ethan produced emails showing his office requesting my case file for risk assessment. The room finally saw the pattern, Robert manufacturing crisis, then offering himself as stability. Votes shifted. A governance committee censured him, froze his access to internal data, and announced an external audit of the foundation. Robert left without shouting, which somehow looked smaller than rage. Nico didn't celebrate, he just exhaled once. That evening the house felt quieter, not because danger vanished, but because the loudest enemy had stepped back. Lily did her homework at the playroom table, humming, while Grandma June stirred soup like a prayer. Nico and I stood in the kitchen with the contract between us, the paper that had started everything. I expected him to discuss settlements and exit clauses. Instead he stared at the signature line as if it disgusted him. The silence wasn't cold now, it was searching. My chest hurt with resentment and new gratitude, and I waited for him to choose words or walls. He lifted the contract with both hands, not rushing, then tore it straight down the middle. The sound was soft, like fabric ripping, but it shook me harder than any shout. He tore it again, and again, until the pages were confetti on the counter. I watched my printed name split into pieces, and the weight behind my ring loosened. Nico didn't touch me. He simply made it clear, with a steady look and an open palm, that the transaction was over. What he wanted now was consent without debt, a marriage chosen with eyes open and future chosen freely. I didn't say yes because the papers were torn. I said yes because he finally stood where the light could reach him. I told him, in my own careful way, that Lily came first, that my voice would stay mine, and that any love between us would have to be honest, even when it was inconvenient. I felt him accept those boundaries like a man accepting weather, not bargaining. For the first time, I wasn't signing my life away. I was stepping toward him with my hands visible, no secrets, no performance, only the quiet hope of being chosen back. Later, Lily padded into the kitchen in socks, drawn by the smell of soup and the sound of ripped paper. She looked at the shredded pieces, then at Nico's face, and offered him a sticker from her pocket, as if stickers could patch adult problems. Nico crouched so her height mattered, and she pressed the star onto his sweater with solemn care. Grandma June laughed softly, the first real laugh in days. Lily asked for a bedtime story, and this time Nico stayed in the doorway while I read, not distant, not claiming, just present. The monitor blinked, like permission. In the weeks that followed, the internet moved on, but my heart didn't forget. I learned that power without truth is just fear wearing a suit, and that love without consent is only ownership with nicer words. Nico's world stayed dangerous, yet it became less cruel the day we stopped hiding and started choosing. When I think back to that first signature, I remember how alone I felt, and how community can change a story just by witnessing it. If you're here, like this video, share it with someone who needs courage, and comment what you would have signed for.